Okay, great.
Hilary, it's all yours. Thanks.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thanks for venturing out on a snowy day, depending on where you are. I'm actually up in Saranac Lake, and we're looking at just over 6 inches of snow, and I'm also on my cell phone. So if for some reason you're having a hard time hearing me, just let me know and I'll move near a window or something. Although I am still hearing quite a bit of feedback. I don't know if that's... Anyway, I'll get going. Okay, so hopefully you're online and you can see the presentation. I titled it A Year in Review, but the title I really want to share with you is of course the Yahoo part of the title, because it's been a really big year for the Adirondack Park Invasive Plant Program. 3 of the most important milestones, of course, is that this is our 10-year anniversary of the partnership. And it's been a long road to get here, but certainly a very productive one.
Hey, Hilary, could I pause you real quick? I'm going to mute all the lines, and to unmute, I think I need you to press *6. Okay.
*6. Okay.
Hang on a second.
Call.
All participants have been muted, but you can unmute your line by pressing *6.
Hi, can you hear me, I hope? I heard the little message that said mute off. Troy, can you confirm that?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, so the 3 of the most important milestones that the APIPP had this year, of course, was celebrating our 10-year anniversary, welcoming our new aquatic invasive species coordinator, Tyler Smith, and then most recently having an improved contract with APIPP. So it has been a big year, certainly a cause of celebration among many partners and players in the Adirondack region. So with that, I do want to take a moment and just highlight some of the people that have helped get us to where we are today. Certainly there are countless names over those 10 years. But in the center there are really the core partners who had the vision to put this program into place 10 years ago and surprisingly stuck with us over the years. So of course we have Stephen Flint on the left, Dirk Bryant next to him from the Nature Conservancy, Dan Spada in the center from Adirondack Park Agency, our new hire Tyler behind Dan. And then in the back there you see Rich Ambusky and Kyle Williams from DOT, Mark Craig from Region 6, DEC. Next to him on the right is John Fouge, and Ed Franz also from DOT. It's been a pleasure to work with all of them. Absent from this photo is Ken Kogut with DEC Region 5, who also has been a part of the program for that 10 years. And this is just a smattering of snapshots from our work both in the field and in the office, really putting our nose to the grindstone to make a difference with invasives in the Adirondack region. So again, it's been a pleasure to work with all of these team members and the future partners and volunteers that will be essential as this program moves forward. So I don't have my list up here to see who's on the call, but I imagine many of you are very familiar with APIPP, but I do want to just give a little bit of fundamental background of the program. We have 4 principal partners, of course, the Nature Conservancy, Department of Environmental Conservation, Adirondack Park Agency, and the Department of Transportation. And these were the original founding partners and recently reissued another cooperative agreement as the principal partners. And Troy mentioned actually that the slides are slightly cut off, so I apologize in advance. I'm not sure what text will be cut off. But in the lower right there is a map showing the regional partnerships. And I think as many of you know, we have expanded our project area outside of the blue line to include the northern reaches of Franklin and Clinton counties. Our mission is to protect the Adirondack region from the negative impacts of non-native invasive species. And again, this mission statement reflects our broadened scope now beyond plants and also beyond the blue line. And our 3 main goals are to prevent new introductions, to rapidly detect and eradicate new infestations, and to manage existing priority infestations to mitigate impacts. again, putting a lot of emphasis on prevention, early detection, and rapid response. And we're involved in a lot of different activities. It's a comprehensive, integrated approach, such as those approaches being used in other prisons across the state. And again, the partnerships are the foundation of this program. And I think we all know that it's really critical moving forward that we share our expertise among our partners, our resources, and that's how we're really going to maximize the effectiveness of developing strategies for this very complex challenge that we're faced with. Also, certainly working at the scales at which we all are working at in our prisons really requires building partnerships. Okay, so this is a slide that you've seen before. It's the 12 recommendations from the Invasive Species Task Force. And basically how these PRISM calls have been structured over the year is that a feature presenter would be speaking as to the progress of the implementation of these recommendations. So that's the goal of the presentation today, is to describe the progress of the PRISM element of these recommendations. So we fall into the 12th recommendation, which is to recognize and fund demonstration projects. There are actually two prongs of that recommendation. The first is the eradication grants, which are demonstration projects, and the second are the regional partnerships. So again, I think it's really important that I reiterate that this program didn't happen overnight. It's been 10 years in the making, and we started back in the late 90s as a seasonal pilot project. Partners that I mentioned got together. They developed a strategy to start looking at which terrestrial invasive plants were here and where they were. It was just seasonally based, little to no dedicated staff on the issue, and then for several years they worked on a seasonal basis doing inventory and then moving pretty quickly into rapid response for priority infestations. And it really wasn't until 2002 that the aquatic project came on the scene, funded by an EPA grant and housed at the Adirondack Park Agency. And then we recognized that there were a lot of the same partners working both on terrestrial and aquatic invasive species. So we merged the program in 2003, and that's when it was moved down to the Adirondack chapter of the Nature Conservancy. And pretty much since 2003, we've been moving forward as a comprehensive integrated program, really trying to communicate our successes, engage partners, leverage additional dollars to keep the core coordination part of the program underway, and building capacity in new programs. So it wasn't until this year, as everybody knows, that we actually were able to secure dedicated funding for the continuation of the program. And certainly this is a really exciting time as we look forward to meeting the demands that the invasive species issues are facing us with up here, which is primarily the capacity to respond to new infestations. We want to make sure we're leveraging additional resources for priority projects, and we also recognize that there are still a lot of partners out there that we need to reach out to and engage. So it's been a long road, but I feel we made a lot of progress in really a short amount of time. And while we were building the program over that time, that it didn't happen overnight, neither did dedicated funding happen overnight, that's for sure. So I wanted to just include a slide that showed kind of the creative mechanisms that we needed to do to bring dollars to the program. Luckily, we did have short-term contributions from our founding principal partners, but over those 10 years, we received 9 grants, so that's almost a grant a year to keep the program alive. It took a lot of choreographing for sure, administratively, but we were managed to fill any gaps over that 10 years to build our capacity to address this issue. So I kind of roughed it out, again, starting as a seasonal pilot project. Not a lot of money, but a lot of heart, for sure, with the partners and the volunteers to make this program a reality. So we went from, an under a $20,000 project to upwards of 250 now with EPF funding. But again, it didn't happen overnight. We started with a half-time employee, and now over the years we've been building capacity through our successes and demonstrating need to funding 3 full-time equivalents now with the EPF funding. So that brings us to the EPF contract that I know many of us are still waiting in the wings, and there does seem to be progress being made in terms of trying to get those out the door. So I wanted to take an opportunity to share with you how our contract is going to roll out, what those dollars are being used for, and what it will continue to do in the future. So there was a press release not too long ago that announced that the Adirondack Prism will be receiving about $1.3 million over the next 5 years, which averages out to about $250,000 per year. And its goal is to fund core coordinating staff, at least in the Adirondack Prism. So it's going to fund 3 staff, a director position who will coordinate, be responsible for the regional coordination of the Prism and the partners, strategy development and planning, as well as new program development and leveraging other grants dollars to get to the park and the partners within the Prism. We have a terrestrial project coordinator who will oversee the field activities for terrestrial invasive species, primarily the early detection and rapid response activities, as well as utilizing best management practices and assisting with the development of permitting for those management projects. Our 3rd staff member is the aquatic project coordinator, and that position oversees the aquatic invasive species monitoring program. Right now it's focused largely on aquatic invasive plants, but we look to expand that to assist DEC with other monitoring needs that they may have for other AIS species. The coordinator for aquatics will also be heavily involved in education and outreach activities throughout the Prism. There's also funding for a seasonal stewardship position, and that person will assist in any of the other activities that we have underway, primarily early detection and rapid response with our terrestrial and aquatic coordinators. And then in addition to the staffing component, of course, there are a variety of other just operational expenses that you would see in any budget. So I included a slide called Meet the Prismers, and I thought it would be fun to just describe some of the partnerships that we have underway on a more regular annual basis. So we have our Prism staff that's funded by EPF, me, my colleagues Stephen Flint and Tyler Smith. And then we've been lucky enough to have institutional support from DEC and DOT to help build seasonal stewardship capacity in the summers. Wayne Blanchard has been a phenomenon along campgrounds throughout the Adirondack region. He's done exceptional work, and we're really grateful for the department for keeping his position on seasonally. They have also helped to fund 2 Student Conservation Association interns who have helped Stephen with forest preserve early detection and rapid response. And DOT also started an internship program last year, and this was the 2nd year for them. And those interns are involved in a variety of DOT projects, one of which is invasive species mapping and control. And then lastly, we've been able, with a DEC eradication grant, to have a seasonal steward helping to implement a European frogbed eradication project in the Grass River. So these are the folks who have been employed over the years to help address invasives in the Adirondack Prism. So I want to just quickly go through some of the action items and deliverables that we are expected to produce through the EPF contract. And I would say many of these have already been underway in the park for many years. So there's a really nice parallel between the strategies that we've been using and those that we will be required to use moving forward. So coordination is first and foremost. We need to know who's doing what out there and work collaboratively to address invasive. So that's one of the biggest deliverables that we have going forward, is to coordinate PRISM partner activities. Secondly, to recruit and train volunteers. This too has been something we've been involved in, facilitating training sessions to aid in species identification and survey and control techniques. Identifying and meeting PRISM education and outreach needs. I think we all realize the importance and value of education as an effective spread prevention measure. And certainly that has been a cornerstone of our program in the Adirondacks. Establish a monitoring network for early detection of invasive species. Again, the surveillance part of the equation is really critical if we want to fully implement an early detection rapid response program. We need a systematic, strategic approach to keeping watchful eyes on throughout our PRISM. Supporting academic research as needed through citizen science. We had a great presentation by Holly Menninger not too long ago about the new Invasive Species Research Institute. And I think that going forward that will really help us with this number 5 deliverable, which is trying to bridge that disconnect often between research and resource practitioners and applied science. So going forward, we've identified a lot of research needs over the years that we haven't been able to meet, and we look forward to working with Holly and the Institute to try to come up with ways to close that gap. Developing a PRISM strategic plan. That's something that the PRISM coordinators are working with the Office of Invasive Species Coordination on. We are using that as a 5-year gauge for us to outline our vision for the PRISM as well as identify goals that we can work towards. A 7th deliverable or action item that we'll be working on is to develop PRISM-specific invasive species management plans. You may remember in a previous call talking about invasive species prevention zones. This is a strategy that came out of the Long Island Partnership. And so it's an opportunity for us to really look at our PRISM, identify areas where we can make a difference with either keeping invasives out or maintaining them at a threshold below which they will be causing negative impacts. Okay, so the next deliverable we'll be working on is implementing eradication projects to remove invasive species. And this one, of course, is particularly important to us in the Adirondacks because there are still so many opportunities for us to hold the line and push back the level of invasion here. So this is something that we'll be working really closely with our terrestrial and aquatic field coordinators as well as with the communities in the Adirondacks to implement eradication projects in priority areas. Developing an annual work plan. That's an opportunity for us to explain our near-term priorities. And then moving on to developing an annual report where we report out how we did in meeting those near-term priorities as well as keeping those long-term objectives in mind as well. Coordinating access to private and public lands is another important activity we'll be involved in within our PRISM. We recognize also in the Adirondacks there's a significant amount of private land, and luckily many of those private landowners are very good stewards of the land, and we'll look forward to continuing to work with them and other shore owners on early detection and best management practices. And we're moving towards the home stretch of these different actions that we'll be responsible for in our contract, and the last two are really looking outside of the PRISM to work with other PRISMs as well as the Office of Invasive Species Coordination. And this is obviously a very valuable and important step for us to take to learn from one another and to share the strategies that we're all employing to really strengthen the New York State program as a whole. And also there will be, in the legislation that was passed last year in August, there was just a description about holding a regular invasive species conference. And so there's been discussion as to having that, a biennial conference every 2 years or so. And so the PRISMs will be really play an important role in communicating some of the public needs that we're hearing from the ground up into, putting that into a constructive forum to learn more and take lessons learned back to the field. So those are kind of the 13 overarching actions that the Adirondack PRISM will be working to meet through the EPF contract scope of work. So now I have a few slides just about some of the underlying planning that we've been doing over the years, because I think through those 13 actions that we're responsible for, it's evident that planning and coordination are really key to being effective in invasive species management. So some of those documents that we have been working on for a number of years is first this cooperative agreement. This is something that happened this year. This is our third. Well, we were working under a memorandum of understanding, and we adapted the Lower Hudson cooperative agreement this year to have an APIPP PRISM cooperative agreement. This is where we rolled out the PRISM approach, and we had a signing event for our 4 founding partners in August at the Adirondack Park Agency monthly meeting. And the content of that cooperative agreement, if you haven't already started looking at it for your PRISM, it is a great template to work with, and it basically just has your statement of interest, and at this point is where we broadened our scope beyond plans to address all invasives. We also use it as an opportunity to describe our geographic extent, which again, as I mentioned, is including the northern portions of Clinton and Franklin. It designates the representatives of your PRISM, and it offers an opportunity for you to describe the definitions of and the roles of those different players. So in our cooperative agreement, we describe the roles of principal partners, cooperators, the coordinating staff, as well as the Cornell Cooperative Invasive Species Specialists. So we also have a strategic plan that I wanted to share with you, and this is just overarching themes that we're working on. We drafted this last year, pre-EPF, but of course this is still very critical moving forward to maximize the organizational effectiveness, program management, and resources available for APIPP. We also want to be able to prioritize species and sites to focus prevention and management actions on, to identify and promote breakthrough approaches for spread prevention and best management practices, formalize a park-wide early detection and rapid response network for terrestrial and aquatic invasive plants and other species, increase public understanding of the importance of reducing the introduction, spread, and impact of invasives, and recommend appropriate regional actions, and ensure that partners receive adequate resources to implement priority actions. So when we sat down last year to think about what are we really working on, and again, this was our kind of 5-year plan. We wanted to think about what the large themes are with invasives that we wanted to work on, and this is what we came up with. So I mentioned this because if you remember, one of those 13 deliverables is to come up with a strategic plan. So we'll be working with the Office of Invasives as well as other PRISMs to kind of come up with something that can be uniform in theory for all of the PRISMs, and then also adaptable to meet regional needs and differences. We also have an Adirondack Aquatic Nuisance Species Management Plan, and that was actually approved several years ago. And I just wanted to list some of those objectives, again, those overarching themes. This was developed by about 17 different organizations and vetted through a number of different avenues, county government, as well as some public meetings in the Adirondacks. Another planning and coordination effort that's underway is being spearheaded by the Lake Champlain Basin Program, and this has been an effort that's been several years in the making, and there's a complete draft finished this year, which is an aquatic nuisance species rapid response plan for new introductions of ANS species into Lake Champlain Basin. And what this really did was to start a conversation between New York, Vermont, and Quebec to identify what obstacles there could be in implementing rapid response, and then trying to figure out solutions to overcome those obstacles. So the draft is complete and is being vetted through the Lake Champlain Basin Steering Committee. And then we do have an annual work plan. And again, I just share some of the topics, the categories that we have, and then we fill in between 1 and 15 action items within each of these categories. And again, our work plan was, again, largely adapted from the work plan that they had been using in Long Island. So again, showing how PRISMs really are so important in sharing planning documents and strategies that are being used. And then the permitting, we have a variety of different permitting efforts underway with our state agencies. The Adirondack Park Agency, DEC, and DOT are all taking steps forward to try to work together, identify sticking points with us in terms of when we can and cannot do priority work. So they have been very helpful, and all of these documents are certainly available for your review. And how are we communicating throughout the PRISM? Generally, we have been communicating both via the web as well as in person. We have several meetings throughout the year. Our listserv, which is now synonymous with the PRISM e-list listservs, we had one locally, and then with Chuck O'Neill's effort, we were able to come online with the rest of New York. And we have our website, and we have a biannual newsletter. And then there have been a lot of inter-PRISM coordination efforts in the last year as well, largely through these monthly invasive species conference calls. We also have quarterly PRISM coordinator meetings where one representative from each of the PRISMs calls in with Leslie in the Office of Invasive Species Coordination. And then recently we've been appointed as a member of the Invasive Species Advisory Committee. So I share all of this with you so that you have an idea as to how the PRISMs are fitting in with the bigger New York State program. So now we'll get to the fun stuff, which is what have we been doing this year. And again, this is all kind of linked back to those 13 action items that are within our scope of work with our EPF contract. We have a variety of training sessions this year for aquatic plant identification. New this year was our coordination with DEC in their forest health program. We had a really successful forest pest training with Jerry Carlson and Jason Denham. And I encourage you, if you're interested in this next year, they put on a fabulous workshop and really get people out in the field, looking for signs of forest health and pest damage. So it was a successful year for training sessions with the Adirondack PRISM. We had, I'm just going to share some of the highlights from our terrestrial early detection surveys and monitoring. We found several new black swallower infestations, some of what sizable along the Salmon River and more manageable in the Boquet in Elizabethtown. APIPP did assist with the deployment of EAB, or emerald ash borer traps, up in Clinton County. And they initiated rooftop surveys over 165 miles in the north country of Franklin and Clinton counties. And then the DOT interns, who I mentioned earlier, they helped to do invasive plant mapping along hundreds of miles of right-of-way in the Adirondacks this summer. So switching to the wet side of things, we had about 95 volunteers who have surveyed 81 lakes this year. That brings us to about 219 lakes surveyed by 354 volunteers to date. And we know of 53 invasive plant lakes that are infested with invasive plants this year. We also had several efforts to either inform the public about new species threats. So Didymo was one that, although it wasn't detected in the Adirondack PRISM, there were education outreach efforts to raise awareness among anglers about Didymo and spread prevention. Asian clam was detected in the Champlain Canal, although, so it hasn't made its way into the Lake Champlain Basin yet, but is hovering on the cusp. Water hyacinth was originally reported in Racket River last year. DEC did follow-up surveys, and luckily it did not overwinter. We had 2 new reports of Eurasian water milfoil this year, a new infestation in Paradox Lake that we believe was removed by a lake manager for the lake, and then a private lake informed us this year that they had milfoil, but it was a long-standing infestation. You may have heard that there's a new species in Great Sacandaga Lake, which is spiny water flea. So this is an invertebrate that is in the Great Lakes and in some western New York lakes, but this is the first sighting in the Adirondacks. We have a number of control efforts underway this year, thanks to Stephen Flint and his colleague Wayne Blanchard. They did a tremendous amount of work on the campgrounds and are seeing a sizable reduction in garlic mustard biomass, with the exception of one site at Cranberry Lake. We did some pilot treatments using herbicide on Forest Preserve. This also has been a long effort to get to this point, and we're doing a lot of monitoring and photo documentation of those 4 sites, and countless numbers of infestations controlled along right-of-ways in the Adirondacks, again, thanks to Stephen Flint and the DOT. We've been working on a number of aquatic plant control projects as well. This is relatively new for APIPP. We've been focusing a lot on prevention and early detection with aquatics, but thanks to the DEC eradication grant, we've been able to get our feet wet with doing some management and partnering with other communities and the Paul Smith College Adirondack Watershed Institute. And primarily those efforts have focused on frogbit, which is a new detection in the Grass River, as well as several Eurasian water milfoil management projects. And again, most of this work has been funded by DEC. So the communities in the Adirondacks have been benefited and are very grateful for that eradication grant program. I do want to highlight 2 really fantastic community-based action projects, one terrestrial and one aquatic. And this is what keeps us going as far as I'm concerned, is to really see these projects roll out, have community members involved, and really take ownership of developing local projects. So this is called the Regional Inlet Invasive Plant Program, or RIP, and it was really the brainchild, I think, of Doug Johnson in this photo, as well as several members of the town of Inlet and colleagues in Hamilton County. So in 2007, they asked us to give a workshop on the best management practices for Japanese knotweed, and so Stephen Flint went down and spent a day with them and met with highway department personnel and volunteers and concerned citizens. And the following year, they really took the bull by the horns, and the town of Inlet contributed funding for the program. They got staff certified in the application of herbicide, and they ended up identifying invasive plant coordinators in each of the towns that are listed here, and they controlled over 10,000 Japanese knotweed plants. And then next year, they put together a proposal with a terrestrial invasive species eradication grant to continue this work and really expand their efforts in the town of Inlet to other communities. So I really want to commend them and thank them for their help. It's really a fantastic example of what we can do when we work together. Similarly, the Aquatic Project has an outstanding project through the Scroon Lake Milfoil Scout Program. Again, in 2007, some of their shore owners attended a plant training that we offered, and then they, again, were very proactive. They developed a lake-wide surveillance program. They organized a train-the-trainer workshop this summer that we attended. They developed a DVD that they could give to the hundreds of shore owners or show to the hundreds of shore owners around the lake to rally support. And they're coordinating a very comprehensive lake-wide effort to stamp out Eurasian water milfoil and other potential invasives to the lake. So looking forward, they're very excited to keep the momentum going, and again, I want to certainly extend my congratulations to them for a job well done. We're on the home stretch here, and I appreciate your patience as we move through all of these details. So spread prevention, again, is something that we recognize is really critical and have to invest in if we're going to make a difference on this issue. And one of the premier programs that's underway in the Adirondacks is a boat launch stewardship program that was started by the Paul Smith College Adirondack Watershed Institute. And you train stewards, either paid or volunteer, to be stationed at a boat launch and to communicate with lake users and to conduct visual inspections to remove any invasive species that are attached to the watercraft going into or coming out of a lake. And so it's really spun off from Paul Smith. Some lake groups are organizing their own efforts, as well as Lake Champlain Basin and Lake George Watershed Conference as well have exceptional programs. And we look forward to helping to promote and expand this program in the future. Education and outreach is every year an important component of our program. We have Adirondack Park Invasive Species Awareness Week, which is now Adirondack Invasive Species Awareness Week. It's celebrated the second year of July. We also track how many people we reach through presentations, and we're just hovering over about 1,000 group presentations this year, and offering displays and presentations at different community events as well around the region. Research is something that, again, through the Biodiversity Research Institute, we were able to start dabbling in a little bit. We realized that we've been doing a lot of control, but we want to know whether or not those control efforts are actually resulting in the impacted site going back to more of a native environment. So through this research project, we're looking at control treatments of 3 different species and the subsequent species that are moving in, whether they're native species recolonizing from adjacent communities, or whether or not other non-natives are moving in or other invasives. So we'll be compiling the results of that project this winter and presenting it in the spring. So again, kind of closing out with where our funding has been coming from to do this work. We're still juggling a number of funding sources. Although we're really grateful for EPF, we have several grant projects underway that will be finishing up in the next year or two. And largely the Biodiversity Research Institute for the research I just mentioned, the DEC eradication grant for the frogbit and milfoil eradication projects, Federal Highway Scenic Byway program for a community outreach program, and then the EPF for the overall coordination of the PRISM. And looking forward, we really have set about 3 main priorities that we need to work on. Again, 10 years in the running, we've recognized coordination as a really key step moving forward, but in concert with that is the ability to respond to new infestations. Similarly, we also need to be focusing on better spread prevention programs in the park, and we look forward to continuing to promote boat launch stewardship program as well as others, and then setting prevention and management priorities in the invasive species prevention zones. So that is a snapshot of what we've been working on to date, and I think more importantly, what we'll be working on in the future. I hope that this has helped to set the context for the types of activities that PRISMs can start thinking about and working towards, and also working together on as the other contracts start rolling out from the state.